I see.
Yeah, I remember you not complaining, but you were talking about that class, and you were like, "Oh man." I remember you sitting in the Ling Lounge like a madman, and you were like drawing conspiracy trees on the whiteboard. Like, what does it mean? Yeah.
That's what it does to me. It's not bad. Not a bad thing. Not by any means. Okay. Give people a couple more minutes.
Yep.
And then we get started here. I wonder if there's any northern cities, like grammatical features that are different.
Which northern cities are you talking about?
Milwaukee kind of area.
I don't trust Milwaukee.
What?
It's the name. I don't like the
place or
name.
the people?
Oh, the people are fine. Milwaukee is just a horrible name for a place.
Probably
And I come from a place where we name things Worcester. So take that with a grain of salt.
Oh, are you from Massachusetts?
I am from Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah. I lived in Boston for 5 years, so I'm aware of it.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It was, yeah, I'm gone, so, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We usually have pretty good attendance for this, so I'm hopeful.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
saw a couple other people post things on their stories.
Yeah.
We would have better attendance if there weren't time zone issues. I will say that.
It's the nature of things right now.
Also, week 3 is hitting everyone real hard.
Too, actually, so, yeah, I'm pretty tired right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a coffee bottle thing sitting next to my computer.
Wait, a coffee bottle like you put in a water bottle?
Oh wait, it's a glass
It's invisible.
bottle. I can't show you. The logo maybe is appearing. Take my word for it, okay?
Well, it's just looks like a wug.
Yeah.
So are
I
you
really
guys-
wish.
Oh, no, go on.
No, it was literally just a comment about how I wish we could make wug-shaped cookies again. That would be
Oh,
nice.
I see. Well, I don't know if you heard about the WUG trademark drama.
Yes, I'm so into it.
Who knows whether you'll ever be able to make WUG-shaped anything ever again. Hard to say.
I'm getting a wug tattoo as soon as quarantine is over, and Jean Berko Gleason can't stop me.
She's gonna sneak in your house and rip your flesh off tonight, personally.
Well, yeah.
She's 89. I'd like to see her try.
Don't challenge
I'm
her.
feeling punching my grandmother.
I thought I heard on the radio that tattoo parlors are going to be cleared to open soon.
Really?
Yeah.
Hopefully hair places as well. Oh man.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
because they're cleared doesn't mean I'll do it.
no, yeah, of course. I'm just saying, if you were adventurous, you can go get it done sooner. I'm in LA County though, and nothing is going to be open in LA County ever. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, nothing's going to be open in the Boston area either because we have a governor with brains. I hate to say that about a Republican, but it's true.
So are most of you off campus then? I don't know what's happening with undergrads.
Yep.
Oh,
Is
interesting.
anybody on campus?
None of the board are, I don't believe.
Yeah, but we're all old.
Yeah, after like second year, you don't get housing.
Oh,
So.
I'm just local.
Flex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody's in the San Diego area. No, Kayla's not. Okay, most people are in the San Diego area, except Kayla. Shout out.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
What? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I live in San Bernardino County.
Wait, me too. I'm there right now.
What? Where do you live?
I live in Highland.
Where?
Go meet up,
I live
guys.
just like across from Redlands.
Oh, I want to go to grad school at Redlands. I live in Rancho Cucamonga though.
Oh my gosh, I was just there like 2 days ago.
I don't know what. There's nothing here.
There's dozens of you.
That's right.
Professor, are you in the San Diego area, or did you go back to Canada, or what?
No, I'm here in San Diego actually. So
Rest
I
in
live
peace.
like, yeah, and no, it's nice. I live in like the Kensington City Heights area, if you guys know where that is.
Olivier, where is that?
No, I actually don't know.
Tristan?
It's,
Hold on, let
Wait.
me make sure.
it's west of SDSU.
Oh,
Yeah.
That explains it. Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's off the 15, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
height-wise.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
So there's
some sense.
3 people who have a car. I will say yes. That makes sense.
I don't have a car actually, so I'm very glad that it's remote this year because
Right.
I would have to bike to get to the shuttle in Hillcrest.
Yeah, Hillcrest is a fun
Yeah.
area, but I would not want to bike there every day.
Yeah, it's pretty. I did it last year and it was pretty hard, especially at night, or especially during what's it called, rush hour. Like there's a lot of cars and a lot of turns and stuff, so it was definitely kind of like scary. But
Well, we're pleased that you lasted till the next year.
thank you, that's so sweet.
That's could have taken a very different turn if traffic had been bad.
Yeah, I could have died. It's true.
All right.
And yet we're all still kicking.
All right. I think we should get started here.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yep. Alrighty. So everybody, welcome to the interview with Professor Michelle Yuan. I can see that most people have their video off. That's okay. You can turn it on if you want. That's also okay. But I will ask that everyone but I and Professor Yuan remain muted during the duration of it, just so you know. Yeah. Additionally, we're going to be recording this for members that cannot make it right now, so it'll be asynchronous as well. That's also something that's mandated by associated students. So we're going to be doing that. So without further ado, welcome Professor Michelle Yuan. She's beginning her second year, correct? Teaching at UCSD. She did her undergraduate education at the University of Toronto, and her graduate school was at MIT. And additionally, you did postdoctoral work at University of Chicago. And yeah, so welcome, Professor Michelle Yuan.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here on a Friday night.
Yeah, thank you for being here on a Friday night.
No worries. I have nowhere else to go.
All right. So how did you discover the field of linguistics?
So I was actually a cognitive science major when I first started university. So at the University of Toronto, you had to take Introduction to Linguistics as a prerequisite in Cog Sci, which I think must be the case here too. And I remember I had like a scheduling issue, so I didn't take any of the required Cog Sci classes that first year, but I did take Intro to Linguistics. And I loved it actually. I realized it's actually what I wanted to major in. It kind of made sense to me, you know, like I was very struck by like the idea that you could be looking for patterns in language and that languages actually had rules to them, you know, and that they were not necessarily super random, but they were actually systematic. So I changed majors to linguistics after my first year. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I can relate to that. I also changed my major to become a linguistics major. It's really amazing how we can get all sorts of different people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think math is another common one that I hear a lot. You know, I think people kind of realize that that linguistics is like somewhat mathematical as well. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a very analytical field.
Mm-hmm.
So how was the University of Toronto different from UCSD kind of as an undergraduate institution?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, I was actually thinking about this and they're actually really similar. So hard to say. Because, you know, like what's really similar about them is that, first of all, we had our own undergraduate linguistics association as well, which I remember I was actually really active in too, you know, and we organized events and things like that. So that was similar. I think what's also similar is that, you know, the faculty here, I think, interact with the undergrad students a lot, and vice versa. Like there are a lot of like research opportunities. There's a lot of just general social interaction, maybe not so much like this year because of the pandemic, but, you know, before that, like there was a lot of events and things. And I think I always felt as an undergrad that I was welcome to attend like the holiday party, you know, things like that. So I felt like that was pretty similar to how things are here too. I think course-wise as well, it was really similar. Like there was a wide range of courses in different subfields of linguistics, like not just formal linguistics, but also like there were language classes and there was like psycholinguistics, you know, language acquisition, you know, sociolinguistics. So honestly, they were really similar. I guess the difference is maybe the weather and the general climate. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's good to hear. So what habits did you have as an undergraduate that led you to academic success?
That's a good question. So as I said, I got involved in my undergraduate linguistics association, which I looking back was a really good idea, because what it did was allow me to see more of like what academia was like, just the everyday life, you know, because I saw professors a lot, pretty frequently, and I saw, you know, graduate students frequently. I got to talk to them and learn more about what they do. So I think it prepared me for graduate school too, because I kind of knew what to expect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I also was an RA during my undergrad too, and that also helped a lot. I also, you know, I presented at undergraduate conferences, but at the same time, I had like a social life, so, you know, which I actually think is kind of understated sometimes, and I think professors don't always give that kind of advice to students. But I think work-life balance is also really important, and I try to do that too.
Awesome. And by RA, you mean research assistant, right?
I'm sorry, yeah, I meant research assistant, not resident assistant. Yeah.
Awesome.
Or not resident advisor. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the graduate school application process like? Was it stressful? Was it exciting?
It was both. Well, I actually applied twice because I did a master's in Toronto. So in Canada, it's a little bit different. So typically, most PhD programs in linguistics in Canada require a master's if you're applying from another Canadian school. So, you know, at that time when I was an undergrad, I wasn't intending to leave Canada. It just didn't cross my mind. So I only applied to master's programs, and that was okay. It wasn't too hard. The year after that, though, because I was in a one-year research master's, I was like taking classes, I was TAing, and I was also writing my thesis, and I had to apply to PhD programs. And also I applied to like a few fellowships too. So that was extremely stressful. Yeah. I think the hardest part really was actually writing my research statement, because you know, it's like you're trying to sort of synthesize what you find interesting in linguistics, you know, as someone who hasn't been in grad school or, you know, for very long or at all, but you also wanted to like make sense to like experts. So I was really lucky that my my advisor, like she like really helped me a lot with kind of trying to like make precise what I actually meant to say, you know, which is something that I think is learned, like a learned skill actually. So it worked out in the end. I actually didn't apply very widely. I applied to MIT and also the University of Toronto. And I was lucky I got into MIT, so yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I've talked to other people applying to grad schools, you know, that went to UCSD, and they also were like, man, it's so hard synthesizing everything that I've learned in linguistics into something concise. It can definitely be a challenge for people.
Yeah. Well, in my case, weirdly enough, so I actually reread my statement of purpose going into grad schools last year when I was evaluating like admissions, just because I was kind of like, oh, I'm curious, what did I say? And I actually had forgotten this, but I ended up writing my PhD thesis on what I had intended to in my applications, which I think typically doesn't happen, but like, you know, what I had talked about was exactly what I wrote my thesis on. So that was kind of cool. I really had forgotten that.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So how was the graduate school experience at MIT different from your undergraduate experience?
It was very intense. I really liked it. I learned, I think the way that I think now is really different from from how I thought before I started grad school, which would be the case no matter what you do. I think it's just grad school just kind of puts you in a different mindset. But, you know, there's a particular way of thinking about linguistics questions that I think a place like MIT particularly emphasizes, that I think really stuck with, or I guess that I really absorbed, you know, there. It was definitely really intense, but I should say that because I was in the master's program at U of T, I think I was reasonably prepared for the workload at least. And yeah, I remember the first year, actually the first semester, I would wake up at like 11 a.m., like eat, you know, go straight to campus, stay until 3 a.m. and then bike home, then go straight to bed. That was my schedule for a lot of my first semester. But part of it was because I had cohort mates who were also like night owls, so we would all stay there together. And it was kind of fun, but I wouldn't recommend it at the same time.
Okay. So was the transition into graduate school difficult for you?
Yes and no. As I said, I felt like I was prepared for it to some degree because of my master's, because I had done research on my own before, like in my thesis, and you know, I was used to the graduate level coursework. But I should say the other thing for me is because I grew up in Toronto, so me starting grad school was the first time I actually left my hometown, and I had moved into a new country too. which entails like just kind of random things you don't think about, like having to open a bank account or like, getting a cell phone in a different number, just like random things that you don't really consider. So that was actually kind of hard too. And also just like having to make new friends. But in terms of the academic side, I would say the transition wasn't as bad as I expected. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to MIT. What's Noam Chomsky like?
Okay. Well, so first of all, he's retired, so he's not like, he wasn't really around that frequently. And actually, he's at the University of Arizona now.
Who is he? Okay.
Yeah, so his wife apparently wanted to live somewhere warmer. I think when you're like elderly, you need warmer weather. That seems to be true. I don't know. But I was able to, so my cohort and I in first year got to have lunch with him, which is customary for every first year cohort, which was cool because we got to, sit around a table and ask him like questions about syntax or linguistics generally, like what he thought about, about UG, things like that. That was really cool. And then I was also able to take a seminar with him in my second year, I think, as well, on a recent paper that he had published. So that was really cool too, just being like, oh, I'm like sitting here listening to him talk. But also very saliently, he wasn't, as I said, he wasn't around that frequently, but there were a lot of tourists coming to look for him in our department, taking pictures of everything. And there were like quite a few journalists as well trying to meet with him, I think for political reasons, not linguistics. So that was kind of an interesting like side part of him being at MIT.
Yeah, he's definitely a really influential guy, but from what I've heard, he's also pretty accessible. He spends hours like responding to emails and stuff.
He does. Well, he has a secretary. Well, no, I think she retired, but she while I was in grad school, he had a secretary who would weed out all the I guess the emails that maybe she didn't want him to see or something like that. But all the like the nice ones, would get forwarded to him, so he actually would answer them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, sometimes I see things on like the linguistic subreddit, like, oh, Noam Chomsky responded to my email about this. It's so nice.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think he still does that, even though I think he's like 90 something now. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, what made you decide to go into academia?
Well, I knew I wanted to do a research master's program, which is what I first did before my PhD. When I was an undergrad, just because, first of all, I wasn't really sure what else I would be doing after undergrad. A one-year master's seemed like a good idea to kind of buffer things. And then I kind of figured I would think about whether I wanted to do a PhD, depending on how it went. In my case, I realized I really liked research and I liked the coursework. I liked thinking in the way that I guess academics are trained to think. So I decided to apply for PhD programs for that reason. Or are you asking more like in undergrad, like how did I know?
Just kind of where in the process did you decide it and what kind of things brought that about?
I see. Well, okay. Well, as I mentioned, I was an RA for a professor myself in undergrad. And, at some point she actually began asking me whether I was intending to apply or not to the master's programs and stuff. And I kind of thought about it and I was like, yeah, definitely. And it's, so she actually ended up being my master's supervisor. And she actually ended up 5 years later being on my PhD committee as well, because it was all on Inuktitut, which we can talk more about later, I guess. And now she's my collaborator. So it's kind of cool how that all ended up happening.
That's awesome. Yeah, so what difficulties did you encounter along the way of process?
That was a good question. Well, I mean, okay, academic setbacks for one thing. In my third year, I had submitted my first paper for peer review and it got rejected, and I had like absolutely like the most negative reviews I'd ever like encountered, and I wasn't expecting it because my advisor was like really enthusiastic and really supportive. So, I didn't think it was going to get accepted, but I didn't think it was going to get totally rejected. So that was hard because it was like my first big setback. But actually that paper ended up I ended up rewriting it and resubmitting it and it got published. So it worked out in the end. That was a hard thing to kind of like experience because I felt very demoralized after that. There are also just, like life setbacks, like just personal life setbacks, which are, I mean, I guess it bears on academia because like, I think the thing with academia is it kind of feels like it doesn't really stop. Like it never really stops. It kind of keeps going, keeps moving forward. There are always conferences that are up ahead. If you're taking classes, it's hard to sort of just stop, So you kind of have, like, that's really challenging sometimes when you get like hit with something and you have to like just like, I don't know, figure it out. So that's hard. I also have, like kind of intense things happen in the field. I go to the Arctic. Well, I haven't gone because of COVID, but I typically used to go to the Arctic. One time I remember I got food poisoning the last week I was there, like really intense food poisoning. And I was like, I think it's because I ate some raw, I ate some raw clams that one of my consultants had given me and thinking that it was going to be fine. So the whole last week I was so sick that I could barely get out of bed. So, I canceled all my meetings, obviously. But I was also like, I have no medical care here. I feel terrible. What's going to happen to me? It worked out in the end. I'm fine. But that was hard too. So fieldwork stuff. I think any field worker you ask can tell you at least one like hard thing that they had to deal with. So.
Yeah, definitely. So the languages you study, what sparked your interest in them? And talk a little bit about like which languages you study.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I guess I didn't mention this. So I primarily focus on the Inuit languages, which are spoken across the North American Arctic and Greenland. But I specialize in the varieties that are spoken kind of in the Eastern Canadian Arctic. So that's called Inuktitut or Inuktitut, depending on the dialect. Oh, I actually had pulled up a map, which I'll drop in the chat for you guys, because I don't know how knowledgeable you are of Canadian geography. So feel free to click on that and look at the map. So there's like a big like long island that's just southwest of Greenland, which is labeled as Kalaalleq. That's the language. So where the word Inuktitut is over, that's where I would do fieldwork. Mm-hmm. And I also recently began doing fieldwork in the little green strip that is under the word Inuktitut. That's in Labrador. Yeah, so that's where I do fieldwork. Anyway, so that's what I primarily work on, although since I started at UCSD, I also began to work on a Mixtec variety too, with a speaker who lives in San Diego, and that came about through field methods, so I can talk more about that later if you're interested. Yeah, so if you're asking what sparked my interest in the Inuit languages, I come from a major city in Toronto. There's like a pretty, not like huge, but like non-trivial population of like Indigenous people, like diaspora communities who live in like the major southern cities, like Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, for example. And I was actually able to take like introduction to Inuktitut language classes in university. So I signed up for it because I was like, oh, cool. Like, I don't know anything about the language. I'll sign up. And it turned out to be co-taught by the professor that I mentioned that I worked for in the end, co-taught by her and a native speaker of the language. So at this point, I think I was a sophomore, so I had just switched my major into linguistics. I like told her I'm in linguistics. Do you have any like RA opportunities? And indeed she did. So that's kind of how it all happened. So me signing up for the language class, that was kind of an accident. But it's a really cool language. I love studying it. So yeah.
Just out of curiosity, did you find it like really difficult to learn, or was like more difficult than other languages you've studied?
It's difficult, but actually it helps when you know linguistics, especially syntax for me, because I don't know if any of you took my morphology class last quarter. I don't think so, but it's one of the kinds of languages where the order of affixes in a given word corresponds very straightforwardly to syntactic structure, like familiar syntactic structure. Like, right above the verb you have like aspect, right above aspect you have tense, right above tense you have like clause typing, morphology, stuff like that. So it's easier when you know linguistics because you kind of know where everything's supposed to go, because otherwise the words can look really, really long, as I'm sure some of you have heard. It's polysynthetic, so you can have like whole sentences being expressed by single words. But if you think about it through a linguistic lens, it actually ends up being not that different.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. I talk all day about Inuktitut, so stop me.
No, definitely. It's a really interesting language group. One of my hobbies is Wikipedia surfing language family pages. I stumbled on that one and I'm like, wow. Mm-hmm. It's really, really incredible.
Yeah, it's very cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you have any advice for undergraduates who are interested in pursuing a career in academia?
Yeah, this kind of relates to what I said earlier, like of getting involved, for example, in your department, you know, also because if you apply to graduate programs, you're going to have to ask for reference letters, right? And of course, those can come about just from, you know, your grades or something like that, or like your homework or your papers, but also sometimes it is helpful for professors too, to kind of be able to put not just a face, but also a personality to the name, right? And you know, like I've read quite a few like reference letters at this point from other people applying here, for example, and you know, they do actually talk about personality in addition to their research interests, you know, which you wouldn't expect. I mean, there's nothing terrible, but just, you know, so-and-so is introverted, but, you know, like soft-spoken, but like has great ideas, you know, things like that, right? Things that you learn from interacting with a person. So that's the thing to bear in mind. But also I'd say do your research. By that, I mean, like, what kinds of programs do you want to apply to? What programs make the most sense in terms of fit, right? What kinds of programs, you know, provide funding versus not so much funding? Like, there's all these like factors that are worth thinking about and that are actually like, you know, it's like publicly available information. That's one thing. But also, so, you know, I think that there's also some level of introspection, like self-introspection involved too. Like, why do you want to do a PhD? Because, you know, it's not for everyone. It's not always that fun. And also right now anyway, like, sorry to be a downer, but the job market is terrible for academic jobs. Maybe it'll be better in like, you know, 5 years, who knows? But I'm just saying that like, you should think about it. Like, is it worth your time to do too, right? So, you know, think long-term, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's it like being an assistant professor?
It's very busy, but it's very nice. I like it. So, you know, in addition to teaching, I do my own research. I also advise students, undergrad and graduate level. And also I do a lot of like random service. So like I review for journals, and I also do service in my department. Like I'm organizing the colloquia this year, for example. So, but no, it's really fun. I like being able to think about the things that I find most interesting. And like, I like to also try to impart why I think these things are interesting to other people, especially students. You know, so I like teaching, for example. And I just like interacting with my colleagues and with like students, like undergrad and grad. It's just really fun. I feel like I learn a lot from you guys, honestly. Almost more than, or not just you specifically, but like students. I learn a lot from students, almost more than I learn from like, you know, papers and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to current undergraduate linguistics students, what would it be?
It would still be get involved. And what I said earlier, you know, again, you know, I think there's no harm. I mean, maybe the harm would be that you have less time to do other things that you might find worthwhile too. But if it's something that you're interested in, you know, why not, right? Like, you know, like I guess what you guys are doing, not just like attending this thing on a Friday night, but also like organizing events and like talking to each other, like meeting one another. I think I really found in my first like 2 years of undergrad or so to be kind of isolating sometimes. I commuted also to my university, so that was also a struggle sometimes, like in terms of just like making friends. And I felt a lot happier once I like found like fellow like linguistics people in undergrad to hang out with, because you know you can well, but first of all you can like do homework together, that's helpful, but also you know you can like talk to each other, you have things in common, you know, so I think people are just happier when they have people that they like and understand around them. So I think getting involved in like, you know, your department is one way to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's it like conducting research in the field?
It's really fun. I really like it. Well, you know, I haven't been able to go, as I said, because of COVID. I was last there actually in December 2019. I went to Labrador then. I wasn't teaching my first quarter when I first arrived, so that's why I decided to go to the field. It's great. So it's busy and it's like nonstop because, you know, you're only there for a few weeks, so you want to make the most of it and you want to do as much as you can. So a lot of it's just like scheduling meetings like in advance, like, you know, so like sometimes I would do like 4 hours a day, every single day. Plus I would type up my notes and stuff. Plus I would like try to go on a hike, you know, like a nice thing too. But no, I loved it, honestly. Like you know, I'd say it's one of my favorite parts of doing linguistics, like being able to do field work. You know, it's really rewarding and like quite like meaningful to be able to learn from the communities that I've been able to, you know, be like part of. You know, they share things with me that they don't have to share. So that's really like, it's really lovely. And, you know, it's not just language, it's also culture, it's like food, it's like space, you know, like people telling me where to go hiking, you know, inviting me. I went clubbing once in Iqaluit, where I do field work, which was really interesting. It has a population of 5,000, but there is a club, nightclub. So, you know, like things like that, just things you would never be able to experience otherwise. So I really love it. And, you know, maybe I mentioned this already. I've been doing work on Mishtec over Zoom for the past like 7 months, no, for the past 9 months, or on Zoom since March, but doing the fieldwork since January through field methods initially, but we've continued it, and that's been really fun too. You know, obviously there's no like exotic location, but like I think no matter what, when someone's just like sharing all this stuff with you, you're able to sort of learn from them. I think it's super rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of research are you currently conducting?
So I've been continuing my research on the Inuit languages. So, you know, I said this already, but I'm a syntactician, or maybe I didn't say it. You said it, I forget. I'm a syntactician. That means I think about sentence structure, and in particular, I'm a morphosyntactician, which means I study the intersection between sentence structure and word structure. So I'm really interested in thinking about how, to what extent the kinds of rules or principles that underlie sentence building can also be found inside complex words. So I've been thinking a lot about that from the point of view of the Inuit languages. I'm also really interested in comparing like really minute details between different dialects of Inuit and trying to sort of situate these tiny, seemingly tiny differences within syntactic theory, and trying to sort of show that the differences are actually very non-trivial and that they like can tell us a lot about language, basically. So that's one big area of my research. Since the field methods class, which I taught with Professor Caballero, who I'm sure you guys know as well, we co-taught that graduate level sequence in the winter and spring, and we've been continuing to work on Mishtec with our students, our graduate students, and also an undergrad as well, who's my RA this quarter. So Professor Caballero and I have a project on grammatical tone. So that's sort of how tone expresses like syntactic features like tense and negation. So it's really cool because, you know, for me, you know, we're thinking about like how syntax and phonology interact. So to what extent can syntactic structure affect, for example, the tonal processes that you might otherwise see on the surface? And with Professor Caballero and with our graduate students and in my undergrad, we've also been kind of beginning to work on a dictionary project with our language teacher for San Juan Piñas Mixtec as well. So that's been really cool, though that's in the very beginning stages.
Awesome.
That was a rant, but yeah.
No, it's really exciting stuff. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So which undergraduate classes are you teaching this year?
So this year, I'm not teaching any right now, but in the winter, I'll be teaching 121, so syntax. Mm-hmm. And then in the spring, I'm teaching 120 morphology, which is what I taught last year as well. Yeah.
Awesome. And do you have open office hours this quarter in case anyone wants to ask you questions about your work, about anything?
No, I don't this quarter, just because I'm teaching a grad class, so my office hours are for my grad students this quarter. But if anyone ever has any questions, like I'm always very happy to answer by email. I know one of you actually, I recognize your name, had emailed me back in the summer about grad school. Again, I'm happy to answer questions about anything. So don't ever hesitate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've reached the end of my prepared questions. The way we were going to do this is to kind of screen the questions by Tristan, but I recognize all the names in the chat here. So I think we can just kind of ask questions. Whoever wants to go can unmute their mic. I'll mute myself now so we can get some questions.
Yeah, ask anything.
Oh, I have questions. I'm sorry to be on board and being jumping in, but one quick question and then one longer form question. Your consultant for Mishtec, she wouldn't happen to be named Claudia, would she?
Yeah, she was actually the same. Or did you take 139?
Yeah, I did. She was so amazing as a language consultant. I was just like, wait, I know that language. That's
yeah.
person.
Yes, so
Um,
just to clarify what Alina's talking about, so Claudia was actually she was the field methods person for 139 2 years in a row, I think in 2017 and 2018, maybe, or maybe 2018, 2019. I'm kind of blanking which 2 years, but yeah, and then we invited her back to teach 240 and 241 last year.
yeah. And then for the real, I'm so sorry, frog in my throat. Then for the like legit long form question, you mentioned that you did a research master's at the University of Toronto. I was wondering if you could talk about that, because I know that in some of the master's programs I've looked into, some of them would be taught masters and some would be research. Can you talk about the differences?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, I mean, in Canada, the way it works, as I kind of mentioned, is that most people in linguistics will do a master's before they do a PhD. So the master's is actually oriented towards eventually doing a PhD. So you'll take classes with fellow PhD students and also fellow master's students. And you'll TA as well, and you'll write a master's thesis. So you're actually doing the same things that a first year PhD student is doing, plus a master's thesis. And those are typically in Canada 1 or 2 years, and they're fully funded. So you get funded the same amount of money as like a PhD student would be, which is like not much, but like it's not different is the point. I know it's a bit different in the US because the US has a lot of terminal masters too, where you pay tuition. And I guess you might take coursework for those kinds of programs too, and you might also write a thesis, and those sometimes do prepare you for a PhD, but not always.
Yeah, I am thinking of non-US programs in this case, but cool,
Yeah.
very helpful.
I guess I'll add one thing though, is that I don't know about non-Canadian programs, but for Canadian programs at least, they don't really have that much funding to let in too many international students, just because it costs more for the programs themselves. So they usually would let in mostly Canadian students, and they'll maybe admit like 1 or 2 international students. So that's worth bearing in mind too.
Mike, okay. So as a second year, the idea of academia and, pursuing a PhD and doing field work is like exciting, it seems really cool. And, maybe I do want to do it, maybe I don't, but I'd like to explore the idea of that. But all things considered, it seems like a very long, tumultuous, and like, it seems like a lot. And this kind of was covered in an earlier question, but at least in your own experience in this field particularly, is there like a certain mindset or like a way of thinking or a kind of scope that helped you specifically when, as you were going through your linguistic road as far as academia is concerned?
Mm-hmm. That is a really good question. So in my case, I was really lucky that the particular RA-ship I did involved digitizing and transcribing my advisor's like field tapes from like the late 80s, early 90s. So it was my job to like type them out literally, and like type out the word lists that she was eliciting and stuff like that. At the time, I remember thinking it was really boring. Later on, I began to realize that I actually was very lucky to be able to listen to these. That really helped because it gave me a sense of like what fieldwork actually was concretely, because I was listening to them, right? That being said, like we offer here like Ling 139, which is the field methods class. I don't know. I mean, I guess some of you have taken it. I don't know if all of you have. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I think it's really rewarding because that kind of class gives you experience in like not just like how to do fieldwork, but also it exposes you to like new languages, new kinds of phenomena that you might not necessarily encounter in your classes, just because a lot of the classes, not always, but sometimes they're kind of English focused, or like common language focused, maybe not like phonology, but like syntax, surely, right? So it just gives you the sense of what kinds of things are even out there, and that's really useful. But it also, and the other thing is it teaches you the ethics of how to work with speakers, right? Like how not to be rude to them, how not to make them mad, and also, just like thinking about like what research is for and for whom, right? Like, if that makes sense. Yeah. So kind of taking it away from like like an individualistic, like I'm doing my research, it's so interesting to me, like here's how this research benefits me, but like so like abstracting away from that and thinking about the fact that you're like in an interpersonal relationship with a person that you're mutually like working with, you know.
And would you say that's kind of like a self-cultivating type of experience where the more you engage with those interpersonal relationships, the more you actually want to go out and, just do more?
I think so. I mean, I think it's also maybe like individual personalities too. I mean, there are plenty of like amazing linguists that I know personally who don't do any field work, and it doesn't mean that they're like worse people interpersonally or anything like that. There's some things that like draw me to field work. It's just it works with my personality. If you think it sounds interesting to you, then probably it works for you too. So but I think maybe it is self-cultivating to the extent that you kind of have to sort of do it to sort of see what it's like. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, that's good. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to talk more over email if you want.
I have a question. So if I'm interested in being an RA, like, because I want to, but I just find it kind of intimidating to like approach professors about that kind of stuff. Like, is there like, do you have like a way like that you recommend of like going about it? Because I don't want to be like, I don't know. I get so nervous about it, but like I have a professor in mind that I want to ask, but I'm like scared.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we're human beings too. So, keep that in mind. Like we're sympathetic people for sure. But well, first of all, I'll mention that we're actually trying to like the department, the field workers rather in the department, we're actually trying to pilot a new RA-ship system this actually next quarter in the winter, where we're hoping to sort of see if we can match undergrads to grad students for RA ships for 199s. And this would be fieldwork specific, so not for, like, for example, not for the psycholinguists per se, because we're just piloting it in a small group right now to see if it works. So I don't really know. I mean, we're accepting like graduate student proposals right now, so we don't know how many RAs will be able to match, but that would be like a slightly lower pressure thing that you could consider doing first, maybe, and then maybe next quarter or the following quarter, maybe then you could find a professor too. Maybe you'll be less nervous because you've already done it, right? That's one option. But if you have a particular professor in mind and you want to ask them, I mean, I don't know who you're talking about, but I say that there's no reason not to ask. Actually, I wasn't planning on having an RA for my project, but a student from my morphology class last spring emailed me out of the blue after the class was over and just said, I was just wondering if you had any RA ships available. I thought about it, maybe I would have not, and I would have said, I'm so sorry, no. But in my case, I was like, actually, let's like talk about it, and we can see if there's anything that makes sense for you and for me. And it turned out that there was. So he's actually helping us with our San Juan Piña's Mixtec Dictionary project. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't hurt to ask. The very worst thing that will happen is the professor will very politely decline or not answer, but that's not that bad.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody from the audience? Sorry to put all two of you on the spot, but I have a question. I know another question, and I wanted to see if y'all wanted to get your first question in.
I do have one. Do you mind? I jump on it. Okay. So you mentioned that you were doing some fieldwork stuff over Zoom, like elicitation. How is that? So are there like technological challenges there? Mm-hmm. How is it different, really?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, so we're very lucky that we had done the first quarter of field methods before everything turned remote. So we were able to establish a pretty good rapport with our language teacher, with Claudia already. She had also, done this with UCSD, number of times now, so she's experienced. But it was a little hard. We had to train her how to use the recorder. So what we did actually was I met her at her church and gave her our departmental recorder. And then Gabby, that is Professor Caballero, like called her and explained, like basically did the whole tutorial on how to use the recorder and upload the recordings onto the Google Drive and like delete all the recordings off the recorder and like use Zoom and everything. So after that, it was reasonably smooth. I would say the hard part is, you know, like for anyone who is interested in phonetic detail, that gets kind of lost if you don't have a sound booth, unfortunately. You know, me and Professor Caballero, we're researching grammatical tone. Thankfully, tone you can hear pretty well with the recorder, as in with the recorder that we have. But yeah, you know, I feel bad for anyone who's trying to do phonetic work right now in these circumstances. It's a lot harder.
I have a comment about that because I'm actually in 139 right now. And
Oh, you are? Oh, with
yeah.
with Emily.
Yeah, we're studying Mom with Angela. And right now we're like starting out basically with just like basic segmentation and then transcription. And it's so hard because it's like a bunch of like phonemes get cut off and stuff. And I'm like, am I even doing this right? Like, but it's a really fun experience. I recommend to anyone. So yeah.
I second that. I mean, I should say even in person, you know, we were getting things wrong all of 240, you know, myself included, and I've been doing field work for like 10 years now, you know, and same as Professor Caballero. So I'd say this is, yeah, it's definitely harder if you're doing it over Zoom and like, you know, it's remote and you can't like see the other person's lips or, you know, whatever, the sound isn't that great, but it's definitely hard in person too at first. Yeah, it's just a learning curve, and eventually you'll realize you know, what you were mistranscribing this whole time, and it improves for sure.
Can I ask you about an earlier comment you made about field work and giving back to the community? Wow, I forgot the question.
That's okay.
Oh, there we go. So I know that you mentioned specifically field work can be a great way of giving back to a community and a culture, especially with I would say underrepresented, but better to say overlooked, actively overlooked communities such as Indigenous communities. What's been your experience with that in the communities that you work with, and what are your thoughts on the ability of linguistics to give back to the world around us?
That's a really great question. You know, it really differs depending on the community in question, just because it makes most sense to like, how do I say this? Tailor whatever a linguist might do to a particular community's wants and needs, right? Which you don't know until you ask them, right? So I'd say like in my situation with Inuit, it's kind of unusual for an indigenous language of the Americas, in that for the Canadian Inuit, they actually have like a whole government system on their own in Nunavut, for example, and also in Nunatsiavut in Labrador. So they have like government organizations, and they have like a language authority and things like that, where, you know, they're responsible for, so there's a lot of like self-determined like stuff going on there with regards to language rights and stuff like that. So it's a bit different there than it is with, for example, Mixtec, or, you know, for example, Emily Clem's work on Amahuaca spoken in Peru. So for example, you know, I am kind of involved in a project in Nunatsiavut in Labrador concerning like the creation of like a lexical database. And that's done like with like kind of in conjunction with the local Nunatsiavut government. So it's actually kind of bureaucratic, and it's not really very like for me as a linguist, it's not very self-driven. With Mixtec, it's a lot more like casual, because you know, me and Professor Caballero and our students and our language teacher Claudia are collaborating to do this thing that Claudia, you know, wants. And if she ever were to not want it anymore, we would just stop, you know. So, and that kind of thing. So it's a bit different. So I'd say, like, I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but, you know, I guess the rule of thumb is to sort of just ask your community what they want, and you know, maybe give them some options. Like, as a linguist, what I have are resources, especially as a, you know, professor. I have funding, or I can get funding if I wanted to, or if I really tried. I have resources. I have a certain amount of linguistic awareness, which means I'm able to look for patterns and like generalizations in a way that might be harder for someone without linguistic training, which not impossible, but maybe a little harder, let's say, right? So these are the things that I can offer as a linguist. What sounds appealing, or what do you think I can help you with? Does that make sense? Yeah. And it depends on also, the linguistic situation. So for example, for San Juan Piñas Mixtec, previously to the field methods class, it had never been documented before, ever. There's no linguistic literature on that variety at all. So for us, it makes sense to like start a dictionary project to get these things down. For a language like Inuktitut, where there's like 30,000 speakers, which is surprisingly a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it is for an indigenous language with some government support. They don't need a dictionary, they already have one, right? They have plenty of dictionaries, but maybe what they want. So like for a while I was kind of involved with like trying to sort of create materials to train community members in linguistics, because that makes more sense for them. So it depends on the situation.
I had one more question for me. I know with like certain, things, this isn't really a question about linguistics per se, but it's about like your experience with fieldwork and maybe how you felt about it. I know like personally, I know this goes for a lot of people, when you do something new, like new occupation or a new hobby, it brings you places both literally and metaphorically that you've never been before. And, you find yourself doing things in a different part of this state or the world with like people who you didn't really know until maybe a week ago. And you kind of have that moment of like imposter syndrome where you're like, who am I? I'm doing this thing, but I'm like in the Arctic and I have food poisoning now. It's kind of crazy. Wasn't expecting this a year ago. Does that kind of sensation, did you experience that when you started doing field work? And if so, like, is that something people should expect when they start, going out there and doing things like field work and getting their feet wet?
Definitely. I'll say that I experienced that. I experience that now still, here with my job, imposter syndrome. I experienced it all throughout grad school, where even if I wasn't in the field. So imposter syndrome is very common. In the field, I guess it's a little bit more high pressure. Like the imposter syndrome sets in more because you're there for a short amount of time. You don't want to have wasted your money, on this trip, or not just money, but your time, your money, your energy preparing for it. You don't want it to go badly. So there's that extra sort of like pressure. Sorry. I was gonna say, you should expect it. It does go away. Once you get there. I definitely had things go wrong aside from the food poisoning. I had people cancel on me like pretty frequently, which kind of messed up my plans. No one was doing it maliciously. It's just that like a lot of people were just like had better things to do than to meet me, which is fair, but it happened, and you have to just kind of learn to adjust and not take anything personally. So I think like for me, once I realized that all I needed to do was just to like invite like flexibility into this situation, and again, not take anything personally, and just move forward, not get mad at anyone for standing me up, whatever. It was a lot easier to do that. And I actually think that holds as like life advice too, if you have like a new job and you feel like you're self-conscious, just don't take it personally, things like that. It's just easier navigating. And I know it's easier said than done, like social anxiety is real, other things are real, but yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. Oh, and bye. Thanks for letting me know you're leaving.
Okay, do we have any quick questions? Because we are over time at this point. I'm sorry.
No worries, although we're close to my bedtime, but I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Hi, I just wanted to say a quick thank you for answering my questions of grad school over the summer. I really appreciated it.
Of course, yes, I remember it was you, yeah.
Okay, all right. Is there anyone else, or are we? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor Yuan, for joining us and agreeing to this interview. It's really interesting, insightful answers.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
No, well, thank you for having me. This is fun. You know, hopefully I'll see you guys around at some point. If not, take care. Have a good rest of your quarter.
Thank you so much. All right. Good night, everybody. And
Bye.
who's recording it? Oh, Tristan. Yeah, you can stop the recording.
Good. All right, bye.